In a world filled with noise, where every thought, action, and emotion is pressed into the bright glare of public scrutiny, there is a gentle but profound call to retreat, to preserve something sacred and unshakable within us. It is a call to keep our lives private and to protect the peace that so often slips away unnoticed, like sand through the cracks of our busy lives. In today's fast-pacing, hyper-connected world, the concept of privacy has become increasingly elusive. We live in an age where every thought, every moment, every opinion is shared and scrutinized by the masses, often with little consideration for the consequences. Social media, news outlets, and constant technological advancements all push us toward openness, towards being seen by others. Yet, in this unrelenting push for visibility, there is an essential truth that many overlook: the value of privacy. Keeping parts of our lives private is not an act of selfishness or exclusion, but an act of preservation, a way to protect what truly matters. Within us, privacy at its core is the ability to safeguard the most intimate aspects of our identity. It is the quiet space where we can be ourselves without the pressure of performing for the eyes of others. In a world that demands constant sharing and transparency, keeping some aspects of your life private is not only important, it is necessary. It is through this privacy that we preserve the sanctity of our thoughts, emotions, and experiences, allowing them to develop and grow without the corrosive influence of judgment or comparison. When we allow the world to peer into every corner of our lives, we risk losing the sense of who we are beyond the image we project. We are not simply the sum of what others see in us. We are also the quiet parts, the thoughts we keep to ourselves, the experiences that are ours alone. These private moments, however fleeting, are crucial for our mental and emotional well-being. In sharing everything, we strip ourselves of this vital space, leaving no room for correction or self-discovery. We allow our lives to be defined by external forces rather than by our own internal compass. This is where the importance of privacy becomes clear. It is in the act of keeping some things private that we protect our peace. Peace is not something that can be manufactured or found in the rush of social media notifications, the endless stream of content, or the approval of others. True peace comes from within, from the quiet moments when we can retreat into ourselves, reflect, and process our experiences. These moments are sacred, and they are often only possible when we choose to keep parts of our lives hidden from public view. Privacy offers us the space to be fully human, to experience the world in a way that is untainted by the need to prove ourselves or seek validation from others. Furthermore, privacy allows us to protect the emotional and psychological boundaries that are necessary for healthy relationships. We often hear the phrase "sharing is caring." But there are things that are simply too precious to be shared with everyone. Some thoughts, some emotions, and some parts of ourselves are too fragile to be exposed to the judgment of others. By keeping these aspects private, we give ourselves the time and space to process them, to understand them, and to decide when and how to share them, if at all. This is not to say that we should live in isolation or avoid connection, but rather that there are certain things that are not meant to be public. Knowledge. By respecting these boundaries, we are better equipped to engage in meaningful relationships and preserve our own well-being. In this sense, privacy is not a form of retreat or escape, but a means of engaging more fully with the world. It is through the act of keeping certain aspects of our lives private that we reclaim control over our own narrative. We decide which pieces of ourselves are shared and which are kept close. This autonomy, this ability to choose, is what allows us to maintain a sense of self in a world that is constantly trying to shape and define us. Without privacy, we become mere reflections of the expectations placed upon us, responding to external pressures rather than listening to our own inner voice. The preservation of privacy also allows us to avoid the dangers of overexposure. When we expose ourselves too freely, when we offer every thought and feeling to the world, we run the risk of losing ourselves in the process. We become entangled in the opinions and judgments of others, constantly seeking approval or fearing rejection. In this constant state of exposure, we lose the space to simply exist, to be without the need for validation. Privacy shields us from this trap, offering a sanctuary where we can simply be who we are without the burden of expectation. Ultimately, keeping your life private is an act of self-respect. It is an acknowledgement that you as an individual are worthy of preserving certain parts of yourself, that your inner life has value beyond what others can see. By protecting your privacy, you create the conditions for peace, for personal growth, and for authentic living. You allow yourself the freedom to explore your thoughts, to question, to change, and to evolve without the fear of being constantly scrutinized. In doing so, you safeguard the peace that comes from knowing who you are, independent of the pressures and judgments of the outside world. And in a world that constantly asks for more, this quiet act of preservation is one of the greatest gifts you can give to yourself. In a world that thrives on the exchange of information, where every second seems to bring a new update or notification, the danger of overexposure is ever present. The relentless pressure to share, to be seen, to make ourselves available at all times can slowly erode our sense of inner peace. It's a phenomenon we witness in every corner of modern life, particularly in the digital age, where social media platforms, blogs, and countless online spaces create an environment where visibility equals validation. However, there is a critical truth that we must confront. Constant exposure and the desire to be seen can lead to an insidious loss of peace. The need to present oneself in a specific way, to maintain a certain image, or to be constantly on for the world can lead to emotional exhaustion. When we share every thought, every image, every small detail of our lives, we begin to give away more than just our time or attention. We offer pieces of our soul, little fragments of ourselves that become subject to the judgments, opinions, and expectations of others. The more we expose, the more we feel compelled to continue, fearing that if we stop sharing, we will lose connection or relevance. In essence, the act of overexposing ourselves leaves us vulnerable to the whims of the outside world, which can have a draining and destabilizing effect on our peace of mind. At its core, overexposure doesn't just strip us of our privacy, it strips us of our autonomy. When we continuously share our lives with others, we relinquish control over how we are seen, how we are understood, and how we define ourselves. Instead of living according to our own values, preferences, and desires, we begin to live according to the expectations of others, chasing approval or validation from a faceless crowd. It's easy to forget that this kind of external validation, while momentarily gratifying, is fleeting and ultimately shallow. The more we seek it, the more it controls us, pulling us away from the peace we so desperately need to maintain balance in our lives. Moreover, the act of oversharing can distort our self-immunity. We begin to craft our identities not from a place of inner truth, but from the reflections we receive from others. Every like, comment, or share becomes a small affirmation that shapes how we see ourselves. This cycle of validation can easily become a trap, where we are constantly trying to outdo ourselves, to present an image that is more compelling, more perfect, or more interesting than the last. In doing so, we forget what it means to simply be. Without the need for comparison or competition, we lose the ability to simply exist in the world without needing others to constantly confirm our worth. The quiet toll that overexposure takes on our inner peace is perhaps most evident in our emotional lives. When we share too much, we often expose ourselves to criticism, judgment, or even misunderstanding. Not every comment or interaction will be positive, and the more we open up to others, the greater the risk of facing negative responses. Criticism, whether constructive or harsh, can chip away at our confidence and self-esteem, leaving us feeling vulnerable and exposed. In contrast, keeping some aspects of our lives private allows us to retain a sense of control over our emotional well-being. By setting boundaries, we can shield ourselves from the constant barrage of opinions that can cloud our peace. This overexposure also affects our relationships with others. When we overshare, we may unintentionally burden those around us with more than they can handle. Every conversation, every interaction becomes a moment for sharing, sometimes at the expense of truly listening or being present. It becomes easy to confuse the act of sharing with the act of connecting, when in reality, genuine connection often thrives in silence or in the quiet sharing of thoughts that are carefully chosen and deeply meaningful. In contrast, oversharing can create a sense of disconnection, as the act of being constantly on or visible leaves little room for authenticity or real intimacy. When we are constantly caught up in the need to share, we miss the moments where we can simply be with someone without the pressure of presenting ourselves or meeting expectations. The solution to this overexposure is not to retreat entirely from the world or to isolate ourselves from those around us. Rather, it is to reclaim control over what we share and when we share it. We must be deliberate in our choices, recognizing that not every thought, every emotion, or every experience needs to be made public. There is wisdom in reserving certain aspects of our lives for ourselves, for the quiet moments of reflection or solitude that allow us to recharge and reconnect with our inner selves. Privacy, in this sense, is not about shutting others out, but about choosing to protect the space where we can be whole and undisturbed. By keeping some parts of our lives private, we protect the delicate balance of our emotional well-being. We retain the power to choose when and how we engage with the world, ensuring that we do so from a place of strength and clarity, not from a need for external validation. This balance, this ability to filter what we expose to others, is essential for maintaining peace. The less we are tied to the opinions of others, the more we are able to cultivate a deep and lasting sense of inner peace. And in this peace, we find the space to grow, to reflect, and to live authentically without the pressure of constant exposure. In a world that constantly demands our attention, where distractions are ubiquitous and the pace of life seems never-ending, solitude is often viewed with suspicion. It's easy to mistake solitude for loneliness, isolation, or even neglect, but true solitude, peaceful and intentional, is a different thing altogether. It is a necessary aspect of personal well-being, providing the space for reflection, self-discovery, and deep thought. In this solitude, we find the quiet necessary to connect with ourselves, to listen to our inner voice, and to make sense of the world around us. Yet for many of us, the notion of solitude has been clouded by a modern-day fear of being alone. We are so accustomed to constant stimulation, be it through technology, social media, or the ever-present demands of work, that we've come to believe that solitude is something to be avoided. However, true solitude is not a form of escape or avoidance. Rather, it is a powerful tool for grounding ourselves and protecting our peace. It is important to distinguish between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is often a feeling of being disconnected or isolated from others, while solitude is the choice to spend time alone in reflection or silence without the presence of others. Loneliness is imposed upon us and it leaves us feeling empty or incomplete. Solitude, on the other hand, is a choice, a conscious decision to withdraw from the noise and the busyness of life in order to connect with ourselves. It is in this quiet space that we can reorient ourselves, free from the constant tug of external expectations, opinions, and obligations. Solitude provides us with the ability to observe our own thoughts, to examine our feelings, and to evaluate the direction of our lives. In our culture, there is an almost paradoxical relationship with being alone. We are constantly told that human connection is essential to happiness, that we should surround ourselves with people and be constantly engaged. Yet, in this pursuit of connection, we risk losing touch with who we are. We lose the ability to listen to our own thoughts and to understand our own needs. In the absence of solitude, we allow the opinions, judgments, and expectations of others to fill the spaces of our lives, leaving little room for our own thoughts to grow and flourish. The pressure to constantly be with others, to always be social or engaged, can drain our energy and prevent us from accessing the deeper parts of ourselves. This is why solitude is not only important, it is essential. It is in solitude that we find the clarity and peace necessary to function in a world that can often be overwhelming. When we spend time alone, we create the conditions for introspection. We are not constantly reacting to the external world or the people around us, but instead, we are able to reflect on our own lives, our choices, and our values. It is in this quiet space that we begin to understand who we are beyond the roles we play or the personas we put on for others. Solitude allows us to confront our inner selves, to grapple with our weaknesses, our desires, and our fears. It is in solitude that we come to understand our true needs, our hopes, and our dreams, free from the distractions that can cloud our judgment. By spending time alone, we give ourselves the opportunity to grow and evolve in a way that is authentic rather than shaped by the pressures of the outside world. Solitude is also essential for creativity and problem solving. When we are alone, we are less likely to be distracted by the constant chatter of others or the demands of society. In the quiet of solitude, our minds are free to wander, to explore new ideas, and to come up with innovative solutions to problems. Many of the greatest thinkers, writers, and artists throughout history have credited their time spent in solitude as the source of their creativity and insight. It is during these moments of solitude that we are able to tap into the deeper recesses of our minds and discover new ways of thinking and being. In contrast, when we are constantly surrounded by noise, our minds become cluttered and our creativity is stifled. Solitude provides the mental space necessary for true creativity to emerge. Another significant benefit of solitude is that it allows us to recharge emotionally and mentally. In today's world, where we are often asked to give our time, energy, and attention to countless people and causes, it is easy to become drained. Constantly meeting the needs and expectations of others can leave us feeling empty and depleted. Solitude gives us the opportunity to rest, to rejuvenate, and to reconnect with our own needs. It is during moments of solitude that we can take a step back, assess our emotional state, and practice self-care. Without this time to recharge, we risk burnout, anxiety, and stress. Solitude allows us to refuel our emotional reserves so that we can continue to engage with the world from a place of strength and peace. It is crucial to understand that solitude does not mean isolation or avoiding relationships with others. It simply means creating space for yourself, choosing moments of quiet reflection that allow you to reconnect with who you are. In a world that constantly demands our attention, solitude offers us a precious opportunity to step back, recharge, and refocus. Solitude provides the conditions for self-discovery, creativity, emotional well-being, and inner peace. It is in this solitude that we find the strength to face the challenges of the world, not from a place of depletion, but from a place of clarity and balance. Therefore, rather than fearing or avoiding solitude, we must learn to embrace it as an essential part of living a fulfilled and peaceful life. The delicate nature of peace is something that can be easily overlooked in the rush and chaos of daily life. It is often taken for granted until it begins to slip away like sand running through our fingers. In the modern world, where we are constantly bombarded with information, distractions, and demands on our time, maintaining peace becomes an act of deliberate intention. Peace is not something that can be obtained through external circumstances alone. It is a state of being that must actively protected and nurtured. To protect peace, we must understand the forces that threaten it and take steps to shield ourselves from the constant pressures that seek to undermine our tranquility. One of the greatest threats to our peace is the constant noise of the world around us. We are constantly surrounded by sounds, whether it is the chatter of people or the constant stream of notifications that demand our attention. This noise, while not always loud in a literal sense, is a persistent background that can drown out our inner peace. It can be easy to ignore the effect that this constant noise has on our mental and emotional well-being. However, over time, this steady stream of distractions takes a toll on our ability to focus, reflect, and find clarity. It becomes difficult to hear our own thoughts when we are constantly bombarded by the voices of others, whether it be through social media, work demands, or the endless flow of news. To protect peace, it is crucial to create space away from this noise. This space doesn't always have to be physical, though that can certainly help. More importantly, it is about creating moments of silence in our daily lives. By intentionally stepping away from the constant demands of technology, work, and social obligations, we create the opportunity to hear our own thoughts, to reflect, and to reconnect with ourselves. This quiet allows us to gather our thoughts, process our emotions, and restore a sense of calm that is often lost in the whirlwind of external noise. Without this space, we are left reacting to the world rather than thoughtfully responding to it, which can lead to anxiety, stress, and a loss of peace. Another threat to our peace is the overwhelming pressure to constantly achieve, perform, and succeed. Our society often values individuals based on their productivity, their ability to meet deadlines, and their capacity to always be on. This constant push for achievement can create a sense of unease and dissatisfaction, as it fosters a belief that we are never enough, that we always need to do more or be more. The more we strive to meet these external standards, the more we lose sight of what truly matters: our own well-being, our own peace of mind. When we are always focused on the next task, the next goal, the next success, we forget the importance of simply being, of allowing ourselves the time to rest and recharge. In order to protect our peace, we must learn to step away from this relentless pursuit of external validation. While ambition and goals are not inherently bad, they must not come at the cost of our mental and emotional health. True peace comes from finding balance, knowing when to work and when to rest, when to pull back. It requires recognizing that our worth is not defined by what we do, but by who we are. When we place too much value on external achievements, we risk losing sight of our own inner peace, which can only be found when we allow ourselves to exist without the constant pressure to prove ourselves. Another key factor in protecting peace is learning to set boundaries. Boundaries are not just about physical space, they are about emotional and mental space. In a world where we are constantly asked to give, whether it is our time, energy, or attention, it can be difficult to know where to draw the line. We are often taught to be generous and selfless, to give to others without hesitation. However, this can quickly lead to burnout if we do not protect our own needs and well-being. By setting clear boundaries, we are able to prioritize our peace and ensure that we are not giving more than we can handle. Boundaries are essential for maintaining balance in our relationships, our work, and our personal lives. They allow us to say no when we need to protect our time and energy, and to ensure that we are not overcommitting ourselves. By learning to set and maintain healthy boundaries, we prevent ourselves from being overwhelmed by the demands of others, giving us the space we need to care for ourselves and maintain our inner peace. Protecting peace also requires us to develop resilience in the face of adversity. Life is filled with challenges, setbacks, and difficult moments, and it is easy to lose our sense of peace when things do not go as planned. However, peace is not about avoiding hardship, it is about learning to navigate difficulties without losing our sense of calm. This requires developing emotional resilience, the ability to face challenges with a sense of inner strength and clarity. Resilience allows us to weather the storms of life without being completely uprooted, and it is a key component of maintaining peace in the face of adversity. To build resilience, we must cultivate self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and a sense of purpose. Self-awareness allows us to recognize when we are losing our peace and take steps to restore it. Emotional intelligence helps us navigate our emotions in a healthy way without allowing them to overwhelm us. A sense of purpose gives us direction and clarity, reminding us that even in difficult times we have something meaningful to strive for. In the end, protecting peace is an ongoing process, one that requires intentional effort and mindfulness. It involves creating space for silence, stepping away from the pressure to constantly achieve, setting boundaries to protect our time, and energy and building resilience to face life's challenges. Peace is not something that can be attained once and for all. It is something that must be actively protected and nurtured. By taking these steps, we can cultivate a deeper sense of calm and well-being that will sustain us through the inevitable ups and downs of life. In a world that is increasingly connected and interconnected, it can be easy to forget the importance of control over what we share with others. The idea that we should be open, transparent, and constantly accessible has become deeply ingrained in our social fabric. We are told to share our lives, our thoughts, and our experiences with others, often without fully considering the consequences of such openness. However, the decision of what to share and what to keep private is not merely a question of convenience. It is an essential act of self-preservation, a way to protect our sense of self and maintain a deep sense of peace in a world that constantly seeks to intrude upon our inner lives. The simple act of deciding what parts of ourselves we make public and which parts we keep private is often overlooked in favor of the more immediate gratification that comes with being seen. It is easy to fall into the trap of seeking validation through external means, whether it be through social media likes, comments, or the attention of others, believing that the more we share, the more we are understood. Yet in truth, constant sharing can often lead to a fragmentation of the self. We begin to define ourselves not by our own internal understanding of who we are, but by how others see us and by the reactions we receive. In a society that prioritizes visibility, the risk is that we lose touch with our core identity, allowing others to define us rather than staying rooted in our own sense of self. What we choose to share should be governed by a careful consideration of both our needs and our boundaries. When we overshare, we not only expose ourselves to others, but we also risk losing the parts of ourselves that are most precious. There are aspects of our lives, our emotions, and our experiences that deserve protection, not because they are shameful, but because they are deeply personal. These private aspects of our lives help form the foundation of who we are, and when we offer them up too freely, we open ourselves to being misunderstood or even judged by others. It is essential then that we take responsibility for what we make public and decide with intention what remains ours alone. The act of protecting certain parts of our lives from public view is an act of self-respect, a way of honoring the parts of ourselves that are not for consumption or validation. At the same time, the choice of what to share is a reflection of the relationships we cultivate. Authentic relationships, whether with friends, family, or partners, are built on mutual trust, respect, and understanding. However, even in the most trusting relationships, there are moments when privacy becomes essential. Not everything we experience needs to be shared with others, and in fact, some things may be better kept to ourselves. The decision to share a thought, a feeling, or an experience should come from a place of inner conviction, not from a sense of obligation or expectation. In choosing what to share, we create the space for more meaningful connections, where the focus is not on constant disclosure, but on understanding and empathy. We honor the depth of our relationships when we know that we can keep certain things to ourselves without fear of alienation or misunderstanding. The act of deciding what to share also requires us to consider the impact of our sharing on others. Every time we expose a part of ourselves, we open the door for others to form opinions or judgments about us. While this can be part of the process of connecting with others, it can also lead to vulnerability and discomfort. Not everyone will interpret our experiences, thoughts, or emotions in the way we intend, and this can lead to misunderstandings. It is in the moments when we feel most exposed that we must be particularly discerning about what we reveal. Sharing too much can place an unnecessary burden on others, especially when they are not prepared or equipped to offer the kind of support or understanding we may need. But carefully choosing what to share and when, we avoid overloading others and maintain a sense of balance in our relationships. There is also the matter of self-protection. The more we share, the more we risk losing control over how our experiences are perceived or interpreted. In some instances, we may share something in good faith, only to have it taken out of context or used in ways that we never intended. Once something is shared with others, it is no longer fully within our control. This can lead to feelings of vulnerability, regret, or even betrayal if others use the information in ways that we hadn't anticipated. By being selective about what we share, we maintain a sense of agency over our own narrative, ensuring that we are not reduced to the parts of ourselves that others choose to focus on. We are not at the mercy of others' interpretations. We are the authors of our own stories, and it is up to us to decide which chapters are made public. The decision to limit what we share is also an important step in protecting our peace. Peace is often a fragile thing, and it can be easily disrupted by the intrusion of others into our inner worlds. When we share too much, we invite others into spaces that are not always conducive to peace. Constant validation, seeking, or feedback can create a cycle of dependency on external opinions, making it difficult to cultivate a sense of inner calm. By protecting what is private, we maintain the space needed to nurture our inner peace, free from the constant influence of the outside world. This is not to say that we should isolate ourselves or avoid connection, but rather that we must learn to protect the sacredness of our personal experiences. In this process, we learn the art of self-respect. Respect for ourselves means acknowledging the importance of what we choose to reveal and what we choose to keep to ourselves. It means understanding that our worth is not defined by how much we share with others, but by the depth of our internal lives and our capacity for reflection. By protecting our privacy, we not only safeguard our peace, but also honor the richness of our own existence, acknowledging that there is value in maintaining boundaries and exercising discernment in our relationships and interactions. When we decide what to share and what to keep private, we assert control over our own lives and preserve the inner peace that is essential for a meaningful and authentic existence. In today's fast-paced world, it can sometimes feel as though we are surrounded by a constant swirl of opinions, expectations, and judgments. Every action, every thought, every moment of our lives seems to be under scrutiny, not just from the people around us, but from the world at large. The pressures of modern society, driven by the need to achieve, to be seen, and to be valued, can weigh heavily on our minds and spirits. However, there is a crucial and often overlooked truth. The less we focus on the opinions of others, the more we are able to cultivate a sense of inner peace and authenticity. In the face of constant external judgment, the ability to detach ourselves from the opinions of others becomes an invaluable tool for maintaining a sense of peace. The need for external validation is deeply ingrained in human nature. From an early age, we are taught to seek approval and affirmation from others. Whether it's the praise of a teacher, the approval of a parent, or the acceptance of our peers, we are conditioned to believe that our worth is tied to the opinions of others. This external validation becomes the yardstick by which we measure our success, happiness, and even our self-worth. However, when we rely too heavily on others to define our value, we risk losing touch with who we truly are. We become dependent on the fluctuating opinions of others, which are often inconsistent and ever-changing. What may be admired by one person can be dismissed by another, and in the pursuit of approval, we can find ourselves adrift, constantly altering our behavior and beliefs to fit the expectations of those around us. The key to breaking free from this cycle is learning to cultivate a sense of self-worth that is independent of external validation. When we begin to detach our sense of peace from the approval of others, we reclaim our autonomy. We recognize that our value is not determined by how others perceive us, but by the integrity of our actions, the authenticity of our thoughts, and the clarity of our purpose. It is only when we stop seeking constant validation from the outside world that we can begin to live according to our own values and beliefs, free from the pressure of pleasing others. This detachment from the opinions of others does not mean we become indifferent or dismissive of the people around us. It does not mean that we ignore the perspectives of others or that we cease to be compassionate and considerate. Rather, it means that we no longer allow the judgments and expectations of others to dictate our choices or influence our peace of mind. When we live in such a way that we are constantly adjusting our behavior or beliefs to meet the approval of others, we create an environment of inner conflict. We are torn between the need to please and the desire to be true to ourselves, and this internal struggle disrupts our peace. By learning to detach ourselves from the need for validation, we free ourselves from this conflict and find a sense of harmony between our inner selves and the outer world. The process of detachment requires us to practice mindfulness and self-awareness. We must develop the ability to observe our thoughts and feelings without immediately reacting to them. When we feel the pull of external expectations or the sting of criticism, we can acknowledge these feelings without allowing them to dictate our behavior. Instead of rushing to defend ourselves or change our course in order to gain approval, we can choose to respond with calm and clarity. This mindfulness allows us to remain centered and grounded regardless of the judgments or opinions of others. When we detach ourselves from the need for external validation, we stop giving others the power to control our emotions and actions. Instead, we take back that power, choosing to act in alignment with our true selves rather than based on the shifting sands of outside expectations. Detaching ourselves from the opinions of others also requires us to confront the fear of rejection, the fear of being judged. Misunderstood or rejected by others is a powerful force that can keep us trapped in the cycle of seeking approval. However, this fear is often based on false beliefs or exaggerated perceptions. The truth is that no matter how much we try to please others, there will always be people who do not approve of us, who may criticize us, or who may not understand our choices. Rejection is an inevitable part of life, and when we learn to embrace this reality, we stop fearing it. Instead of allowing the fear of rejection to dictate our actions, we can choose to move forward with confidence, knowing that our worth is not defined by the acceptance of others. We are free to live our lives authentically, regardless of whether others approve. In order to maintain peace and authenticity in the face of external judgment, it is also important to cultivate a sense of self-compassion. When we detach from the opinions of others, we may feel vulnerable or unsure of ourselves at times. In those moments, it is essential to treat ourselves with kindness and understanding. Instead of criticizing ourselves for not meeting others' expectations, we must learn to accept ourselves as we are, with all of our imperfections and flaws. Self-compassion allows us to embrace our true selves, free from the need to conform or seek validation. It is this acceptance of ourselves that enables us to remain peaceful and centered, even in the face of external judgment. The journey toward detachment from the opinions of others is not an easy one. It requires practice, patience, and a commitment to self-awareness and self-acceptance. However, the rewards are immeasurable. When we no longer live in the shadow of external validation, we find a deep sense of peace and freedom. We are no longer at the mercy of others' judgments or expectations, but are free to live in alignment with our true selves. In doing so, we create a life that is authentically ours, Life that is not defined by the shifting opinions of others, but by our own inner clarity and peace. This is the foundation of true freedom. Freedom from the need to please others, freedom from the constant pressure of validation, and freedom to live a life that is authentic, fulfilling, and peaceful.